So this is the fourth session, and we'll be looking at key aspects linked to research and writing. Okay. So what we'll do is today's session, we'll be looking at, in the morning session is about self-reflection on what are we aiming to do in our research. Have we set the right goals? Is what we are writing a reflection of that? Means whatever we write, does it reflect the goals that we have in our research? And in the afternoon session, we look at your writings, not a lot of them, but a few, and then have that as the basis for discussion. And what I'll try to do is talk about typically what should go in a paragraph. Then maybe also try and see if I can talk to you about the whole problem that most researchers say that they have, which is the writer's block, right? Sometimes I also think I have, but when I have to deliver, I have to keep working, right? So I'll write. So what is the writer's block and how do we handle that? So that I'll try and do in the afternoon. So we'll go ahead with this session today with the first part of the session, right? The first thing that we do today is, today we're going to have lots of short videos that you see and we're going to have discussion. So the first one is this short story that most of us get introduced to in our at a primary level, the tortoise and the hare story. Okay, so we will start with the tortoise and the hare story. You might actually wonder, why does ma'am bring this story? But you will get to see what I'm going to do with this story. So let's get started.
The tortoise and the hare. Once there lived in a forest a hare. The hare was very proud of his speed. In the same forest, there lived a tortoise. One day, the hare made fun of the tortoise for his slow speed. The hare challenged the tortoise to have a race with him. The tortoise accepted the challenge. The day of the race arrived. The other animals in the jungle were there to cheer them. The race started at the fixed time. The hare ran very fast. The tortoise was left much behind. The hare stopped to take rest under a tree. He fell asleep. As for the tortoise, he constantly moved along at a slow pace and overtook the sleeping hare. The hare woke up and ran as fast as he could, but it was too late, as the tortoise had reached the winning post and won the race. Slow and steady wins the race.
Okay, so I have a short exercise for all of you here. You have seen this short video, and most all of us know the story. We all have been told the story and drilled into our head that slow and steady wins the race. What I want all of you to do is, if you are a teacher and if you have shown this video to your students, what are the questions that you're likely to ask them? So type your questions in the chat box and then I'll take the discussion forward from there. Start now. Start thinking about this and start typing your questions. There are no right and wrong questions. Just type your questions, and we're not going to assess your questions. It's just a way of beginning our conversation on this. Okay, I just want you all to pause. Okay, I want you to ask this question to children. Okay, it's not a management class. You're going to ask questions to children after you show such a video. So don't come up with strategies and all that. Just simple questions. Okay, so we'll just pause here. Okay, and quickly run through the kind of questions that are already posed here. Okay. Many of you have started with, why questions, like why hare has lost the game, why has the hare, who participated in the race, what is the objective of this race, why was the hare unable to win the race, what do you think has helped the tortoise win the race, what are the elements necessary for success. So the initial questions were very at a higher end. What are the elements of success? Do you think overconfidence is not the right thing to have, etc.? Then when I said, no, you should address it at the level of children, then you'll see a lot of questions are, how did the tortoise win the race? What made tortoise win the race? What are the strategies for winning? No, that's still a high-end question. Should we be slow and steady like the tortoise? Why do you think the hare paused? What is the moral of the story? Who is the winner? What do you think what do you think has helped the tortoise to win the race? What is necessary to win the race? Okay. What did you learn from this? Then why do you think hare wins the race? Okay, now if you look at the questions, right? There are a lot of what questions, who questions, and a few why questions, right? The why questions are largely about, if you look at the why questions, it's like, why do you think the hare won the race? Okay, then why does not the tortoise take a shortcut? Then why do you think the hare paused? Right? Why should we be steady? Right? So there are, if you look at these questions, very few, let's say, are why questions. Right? Very few are why questions. So often when children are given these kind of stories, and then there is a test done on them to see what is their level of understanding and what is their level of reproduction, then they basically ask these kind of questions. Who had the race? Who won the race? And what was the race about? Then, who was fast? Was the hare fast or the tortoise fast? So there are a lot of factual questions that are asked, and children are expected to remember a lot of the factual questions and respond to the factual questions. You would actually have very few why questions. Like some of you have posed those why questions, like, why did the hare, why did the tortoise win the race? Why do you think the hare paused? Or those are, Lalita ma'am has asked an interesting question. Why does the tortoise agree for a race? And is it fair for a tortoise to have a race on the hare's terms, right? So if you were to ask questions like these, why should the tortoise agree for a race? But can the tortoise actually ask the hare, instead of running, can you actually walk slowly, and let's see who can walk slowly? Then the terms of the race is going to be different, right? So what happens is, we push for a lot of what questions, right? We actually push very few why questions. And why questions are definitely very different. They pause and make you think and get you to think beyond this, right? Why do you do this? And so if I were to go back to my PPT to resume what I want to discuss with you. Okay, so we have done this part. So let's look at, what do we do often when we are assessing people? I mean, whether it's students or our own ways of thinking, how do we even reflect on what we learn, right? So often the focus tends to be on these aspects. And this is called the Bloom's taxonomy. And in the education sector, there's a lot of discussion and deliberation, also reworking of the Bloom's taxonomy. And very often when you look for Bloom's taxonomy, you'll often get a pyramid which has remembering, understanding, applying, evaluating and analyzing, etc. as a pyramid. And a lot of educationists felt that the pyramid actually becomes narrower on the top and heavier at the bottom, and that somewhere might convey that there's a greater emphasis on remembering, understanding, applying, remembering and understanding, and all the other, areas of taxonomy of learning are not of such high significance. So, in fact, it's interesting how the Harvard team had reworked and placed this kind of, a shaped box. I mean, what do you call this? A kind of hexagon. And what they've said is, in fact, one needs to also bring in creating and creation and creativity also at par. So, creating, evaluating, analyzing also at par, right? So, while remembering and understanding is important, you need to move to a high level of skill, which is applying. And then you should also have a much higher level of skills around being able to evaluate, analyze, and also create. Okay. So, if we were to think of our own research process and see where do we stand in this, are we emphasizing much more at the level of remembering, understanding, and most of our questions of what tend to be around here, and if you ask why questions, you're going at the higher level. While all these are important, definitely this requires a higher level of understanding, application, and also creation is definitely dependent on understanding and remembering, having conceptual clarity, knowing how to use different kinds of tools, etc., is very important to be able to move into application, synthesis, critical analysis, or even developing new ways of thinking, etc. So it's important for us to then examine whatever we are doing as to where are we located in this kind of taxonomy. Are we still reproducing the what questions and how questions, or are we going into the why questions? So when you go into the why questions, you definitely push the envelope. You are going beyond the box and looking at alternative ways of examining how to look at a particular subject matter. Now, I want to then ask you to think about ways of thinking about the purpose of your research. Whatever research you're doing, you have questions, you have research questions, you have objectives of your research, etc. And within that, what are the kind of typical questions that you're asking? Okay. So you need to look at that. So typical what questions are, like we have, most of you have typed in the chat box, what questions are, what is the race, and then who are the people who are part of the race, kind of thing. So there could be many questions like, what are the choices students make? What are the schemes that are available for people? Or what are the barriers that elderly face in accessing healthcare services? Or how questions, how often do students go to the library? How is online teaching perceived by students or teachers? How do we improve a particular service delivery, right? So it's like the what and how questions, and very often what and how questions are all exploratory and descriptive in nature. Okay, they help you describe what's going on. After asking these questions and getting responses, you basically are only describing. Like, for example, the survey that we've done yesterday, we're asking, do you have access to the internet? What are the most platforms that you use for searching resources? Then, can you access any resource at this point of time? So it's all about just knowing what is the existing situation. It's about then knowing whether we can, take something forward from there, or there are barriers to it. Let's say if 90% of them say that we don't have access to any e-resources, then I know I can't ask them now right away, go into your college or university e-resource and put keywords and search. I know I can't do that. So it means it gives me a sense of what it's called situational analysis. It gives me a sense of what is it that we have at this point of time on hand. It doesn't really, I didn't really ask any question like, why is it your university does not have access to e-resource? Okay. Or why is it you don't have access to any resource? Right. So if I ask somebody, why is it you don't? Somebody says, look, I'm a contract faculty or I'm a part-time research scholar. Okay, then next question is, what do you mean? Would a contract faculty not gain access to e-resources of a college or university where they teach? Oh, really? Then I get to know how a lot of e-resources are unequally divided between individuals. So it means I am going beyond just asking a question, do you have or you don't have, to ask a question, why you don't have? Okay, so it means it's taking you into a justice question. So you need to see, where are you located? Are you just capturing what is there and just what you think is there? Because it's all dependent on what kind of questions you ask, you get only that kind of answers. You're probably not even delving deep. So these have limited knowledge building potential. The what and how questions are useful, but not sufficient for us to build knowledge. They are more like operational research or market research or evaluation research done in limited ways. There are people who do evaluation research with lots of equity lenses. That can be a very, what do you call, intensive research, which is not asking straightforward questions like, do you have, don't you have, is it working for you, not working for you? If this has to be different, what are your suggestions? That's like very simple, straightforward evaluations that people do. But you really want to do an in-depth, intensive evaluation, then that's as strong as any other research. But typically you would find operational research or market research, based on just getting to know quick, and it's also, market research is also often referred to as quick and dirty research. Their samples are small, probably the samples are not really robust, they're shoddy. So when you see things like exit polls, or you see things like, opinion polls, etc., you often wonder, how did they arrive those numbers? What kind of sample do they have? Because they only put out percentages. 80% said this, 40% said, but hello, what's your N? What's your number? What is your denominator from where you got these percentages? They don't put out those, right? So in terms of knowledge building, very often a lot of that research is interesting as what they call as deep stick, just to get to know what's happening, but it's not robust enough for you to look at it as scientifically designed research. So exploratory, people often, many researchers will begin their research and say, this is going to be an exploratory research. Now, if so much of research is happening on generally a lot of subject matter, social science subject matter, how can you still keep saying exploratory? Very, very new topics, okay, you say exploratory, like we're doing the smartphone research, we said this is an exploratory research, because in a way we're looking at very clearly primary research to look at young people, how do they, use cell phones, what are the kind of perspectives they have, etc. Some knowledge was there, but it's coming only from media. Published literature is there from coming from other countries. So we said exploratory. So you can use the term exploratory absolutely in green terrain, something that's totally new. But a lot of subjects in social sciences are not so new. So you can't keep saying exploratory. You need to commit, work hard, and develop a kind of link to the existing body of knowledge, theoretical frameworks, and not keep saying that, I'm exploring and therefore I don't want to do too much of review literature. Again, when we say descriptive, the statistics that you do with such data also is basically descriptive statistics, right? They'll give you frequencies, you'll probably do a minimal kind of analysis with that kind of thing. So they tend to be very descriptive research and descriptive statistics that you're going to use with that kind of data. So if these are important, but for a PhD research, I would think these are not good enough. You can't subsist, you can't settle down with what questions, how questions. You need to go to the next level, okay? So what is it that you may have to think about? There are also other kinds of research which complicate the what questions, little more than simple, straightforward questions. And these are like research projects that look at comparing between groups. Okay, so what is the difference between men and women in choice of colors? Or what is the difference between men and women in terms of compliance for taking medication for TB? Okay, there you obviously have, you are complicating the matter some more. You are actually looking for differences between men and women in choices. Yeah, but probably you still don't ask question, why are they making these choices differently? That would still be a why question. What is just at the level where you are only scratching the surface. However, it still is better than asking what choice, what is the choice of colors that people have. And people is such a generic term. It's not telling you how they are internally differentiated. So at least we say men and women, you are looking at one axis of differentiation, which is gender. Okay. What is the nutritional intake difference between school going children of different castes? Right now, this is an interesting question because you're asking what's the nutritional intake? What do children eat? Children who go to school going children, they come to the classroom. What is it that they've eaten through the day and what is it that they eat in the morning? And how does it differentiate? How is it different for different children based on their caste background? So it means there is a clear understanding that children of different castes probably have different access to nutrition. So there is an implicit hypothesis there that there is a difference in nutritional intake of children dependent on caste, right? So it means you are not asking a very straightforward question to know, but you're also probing because you know that there are prior disadvantages that children have based on the caste background they come from. Okay, also the class background they come from. So maybe then the research will have the next question that asks, among children from the same caste, is there a difference between male children and female children? Okay, like that it builds a complete set of questions, and the hidden hypothesis is all about what are the social inequalities and how do they manifest in child nutrition, and what are the hidden inequalities in terms of caste, in terms of class, in terms of gender, and how do they manifest in children's malnutrition. And if you were to then say, I want to link it to the scholastic performance of children, and maybe you're saying that the kind of nutritional intake that you have has a link to the kind of academic performance that you have. And there is research to show that, right? So you're trying to see, is it because of nutrition or is it because of parental education? Because if children are first generation, school going children, they have a definite disadvantage compared to children whose parents are already educated. So apart from caste, you also have parental education, which is different. But if you were to focus only on nutrition and see its linkage, then you need to take parents of similar educational background where children are first generation school going children, but are of different caste groups. And then you're trying to see if there is a difference in child malnutrition and school performance. So it means there is an entire research design that you need to put in place in order to be able to answer this question in a way that is going to help you take you somewhere in terms of your interpretation, analysis, interpretation, and conclusion. Okay, so though this is a what question, it is different and it's at a higher level of complexity compared to the bunch of questions that we've seen in the earlier slide. Then you may go beyond causality, comparison, and you also want to do causality, right? You are asking questions like, does domestic violence lead to negative pregnancy outcomes? Okay, so this is a research question. Then if this is the research question, you need to design an entire research or look for data that gives you an understanding about pregnancy outcomes and women's reporting of domestic violence, right? So does domestic violence lead to negative pregnancy outcomes? So you're taking two clear points and you're seeing their relationship. Okay. Now, what is the relationship between examination and anxiety? So you're trying to see the relationship between two important factors or variables, right? So it means there is a higher level of complexity that you have got into, and you're also attempting a causality, right? So it means these kind of questions are directing the researcher to higher level engagement to build a perspective and an argument. Because when you come out with your data, and I mean, you come out with your data analysis and interpretation, you are able to say something about it. Yes, children who have to take an examination, a written examination, are found to be more anxious compared to children who write an assignment or children who do a project. Okay, and of course, you need to know how to assess anxiety. And to assess anxiety, maybe there are scales which you can use, and use the same scale for all the children, but they all have different kind of assessment forms that they are actually facing. And at the end of it, you will see if anxiety levels are higher for children who are doing an examination, then you are able to say that, closed book examination creates more anxiety for children compared to if they were to do an assignment, or if they were to do a project or have an open book exam. So you're able to then grade how these assessments are different and how on an anxiety scale. Okay, so you have to then devise ways of measuring. You need to then also look for other studies that have developed such measures. You have to adapt them, you have to validate them. So you see the levels of complexity of what you're trying to measure, and then your in your position, you take a position on what you think is most appropriate. You think examination is the most appropriate thing for children, or you think there are other modes of assessment. So it means you have a perspective that comes because you've done a study about it, you've studied about it. So if I do a study and I look for research that's showing that domestic violence in itself intrinsically is, a violation of human rights, is a violation of rights of women and children who face domestic violence, but it also seems to be leading to negative outcomes, which is a huge public health concern. Okay, and therefore I would think, looking at that kind of study and that kind of data, that there has to be a way in which we address domestic violence as a public health issue, not a private issue, not a private problem, but it's a social problem. It has to be addressed through the legal system, and it has to be addressed as a community issue. It has to be addressed as a family problem, right? So it means I am taking a position on that. So when you ask questions which are more intense, you're going into the whys and you're looking at causality, then definitely that kind of research is going to place you at a higher level of thinking about the significance of your research, the relevance of your research, and also you're going to be in a position to communicate with the existing body of knowledge and with the community of people who are researching in that subject matter. So if you remember, I was telling you on day one, many of my colleagues will say, oh, I've completed my research project, but I don't really have any time to write a paper. So, it's getting delayed, and that project and the findings got dated. But often I think that when you have asked questions which are very simple and straightforward, you'll often wonder what is new about it that you want to share. So if you've done something like a socio-economic survey of domestic workers, you do something like a socio-economic survey of a slum rehabilitation program, or you're doing something like barriers to care that senior elderly people face. These kind of research, titles and simple objectives that are placed where you say, to understand what are the existing barriers, to understand what are the perspectives on these barriers, to understand how to mitigate these barriers. When you have something so simplistically located, then you often will wonder what is the knowledge building that's happening from there, and what kind of research paper can you write that would be of interest to any journal. Okay, so only if you've gone into a higher level of comparison, thinking about causality, looking at the hidden grid behind a lot of schemes and programs, or look at more issues to do with levels of violations that are happening, you will not be able to connect to any other source or to connect to any other group of people who are talking about it. Yeah, so that's where is the problem. When people say that they don't have time and they've not written up a paper, I don't think the issue is the problem of time. It's more about, do you have enough to really share, or do you think what you have done and gained is very simple, straight, pedantic, you know, monotonous, nothing very interesting and exciting, right? So if we were to really think about how to dig deep into something, okay, I would want you to see this short film, and after that we can pause a while and have a Q&A and then go back again to our presentation. So I'll start this film now. It's a short video.
Long, long ago, there was a king. He had 7 sons. One day, the sons went fishing. Each one caught a fish. They dried the fish. But one didn't dry up. They thought, why? Fish, fish, why didn't you dry? Asked the prince, who had caught the fish. The haystack blocked the sun, said the fish. Haystack, haystack, why did you block the sun? Asked the prince. The cow did not eat me, said the haystack. Oh cow, why didn't you eat the hay? The prince asked. My master didn't untie me, said the cow. Why didn't you untie the cow? He asked the cowherd. Grandma didn't give me food, said the boy. Grandma, grandma, why didn't you give him food? He asked. My little boy was crying, said grandma. Little one, oh little one, why did you cry? He asked. The ant bit me, said the little one. Ant, oh ant, why did you bite? Asked the prince. If you put your finger in my golden ant hill, won't I bite? Said the ant.
So this is a short story, and this was one of the favorite stories that we used to keep hearing as children. And I think this is a story that my husband always told my son when he was small. So much so that the child got so bored with the story. But basically, if you look at this story, which seems to be quite simple and straightforward, what you see is at every stage of the problem, the child asks a why question. Okay, and then it goes to the next level of depth, and then a next level of the depth. So it means a fish that has not dried takes the entire problem to the fact that the ant bit the child's finger. So often when you are asking what questions, probably you're just at the level of the fish has not dried. Okay, you're not looking at why did the fish not dry, and you're not looking at each of the stages in the background which actually lead to a situation that we see at this point of time. So there is a need to look, as we often say, look backwards to look forwards. So you need to get a kind of context. Any understanding of the current context is linked so much to looking at its prior history. Anything that you see as is also linked to many other facets which are not very obvious at the start, right? So research also requires a great deal of emphasis on asking why questions, right? So if I were to ask you, why are you doing this workshop? Okay, so I'll pause here and then we will do the people, please write in the chat box, why are you doing this, this particular workshop? And then we go back to the rest of the questions. Okay, so let's say most of the answers about, why have you come to this workshop and why do you want to be part of this workshop? And why have you registered for this workshop? Largely say things like, I want to better my understanding, I want to improve, I want to learn more, I want to publish, I want to stay track. This kind of workshop will help sharpen existing knowledge, so to get deeper understanding. So it means like, I'm at point A and if I get this input, I can go to point B. Okay. Or I am at this point at A and I want to go into A plus plus, O, etc. So it's clearly when you see a workshop like this, a title of workshop which says academic writing, your focus tends to be on skill building, a new kind of skill building that can enhance your abilities and capacities, and that can help you upgrade yourself and also help your overall improvement, right? So it's more about looking for a toolkit, looking for quick tips, etc. So let's say while this workshop attempts all that, it does give you a lot of insights into all that. But essentially, how you can write, what you can write, and what you write is so much linked to what you have already gathered in your mind. Okay, because no matter how many tips I can give you, it's all like expecting that you can do the icing of the cake like this. You can package it so beautifully. It can look attractive. People will think that it's looking tasty till the time they taste it, right? So it's like can tend to become a very superficial way of thinking about what you can learn when you go through such a session. But as I told you on day one, I said, see, whatever aspiration that I might have, yeah, at this point I have short hair and I also have gray hair. There's no scope for this gray hair to naturally become black. It's going to be white. And for this hair to grow long is going to take donkey's years, right? So if I were to think about enhancing everything about me, and the tip is that you should have beautiful hairstyle, is it possible for me to make any beautiful hairstyle? No, this is all that I have. So even if I get wonderful tips on hairstyles, it's not going to help me because this is my given. So I would like each of you to think, what is your given? How much of research have you done? How much of reading have you done? How much of data you have, right? Then academic writing and the tips that I give you, the insights I give you, it's going to help you to really move it forward. Yeah. So I don't want to discourage you. I don't want to tell you, sorry, you shouldn't have signed up for this workshop, but I'm just telling you your expectations of what you can get from this is also linked to what is it that you are coming to the table. Okay. So please reflect on that aspect as well. Then all that I give you, you can definitely note down and see how you can move forward. Otherwise, as I said, it's like reading a recipe book. When you read a recipe book, how much of it can you really learn? You need to actually do that yourself. Cook, learn, mess up, burn, and then learn how it works. So there are no easy, no shortcuts for that. So we'll go back now to the PPT. Do people have any quick questions or this is okay? Anyway, we'll go up to 11:30 and take a 5-10 minute break. Okay, so let me just go back and just finish that slide, and we can do a Q&A later also. Okay. Right. Have I switched off my audio or my audio is okay? Everything is fine. Okay. So
It is fine, ma'am.
yeah. So the point, therefore, we need to ask is, why are we doing research? From a knowledge point of view, in the sense, you could be doing research and you'll say, okay, if I do research, I can, if I do my PhD, I can get a job in academic institution, and that's good for me as a career. Or I love teaching, and PhD is really the route to go. Or I would like to do PhD and then go and join a market research organization, or I would like to do research and write papers and then move up the ladder in an academic organization. So you have a lot of instrumental reasons why you want to do research, right? That is personal decisions about career choices, and where research is a career choice. But therefore, I'm saying from a knowledge point of view, why are you doing research? Yeah, and this is an important question to ask. And then you also therefore need to ask, is there a theoretical grounding to my work? Yeah, have I clearly latched on to the kind of theoretical perspectives that inform me better about the kind of research questions that I'm asking and the kind of analysis and interpretations that I'm going to do? Or is it linked closely to examining a public policy? Yeah, there is a public policy and you're examining it. Or is it linked to a legislation? Yeah, any legislation, for example, you're working on child labor, or you're working on industrial labor, or you're working on domestic violence, you're working on sexual harassment. Every aspect of our society is legislated. Lots of legislations are there. So are you looking at any legislation to see in terms of how is it actually getting actualized? How is it getting implemented? What kind of concerns people have? So on and so forth. Or are you looking at constitutional guarantees? There are several rights that are there in constitution. There are lots of legislations that legislate our right to work, our right to food. So are you then looking at lots of questions, whether it's to do with education, whether it's to do with nutrition, whether it's to do with political participation, whether it's to do with starvation, hunger? Are you closely looking at also the public policy and the legislations? How are they working? What's really going on? Or are you looking at global conventions, like the CEDAW or the ILO conventions, or the various things the government of India ratifies, things like human rights, etc.? Are you taking that, which basically means all of you have to say, my research is embedded within this perspective, within this particular theoretical framework. It's embedded within this kind of analysis, critical analysis of legislation, so on and so forth. So I would like you to think about it. Okay, so I will, we would take a tea break, but there is 5 minutes. So I will just put this PPT out, and then we can do a Q&A of based on what I have said so far. But it need not be questions that you type on the chat box. A couple of you can ask questions, and we can talk about it, and then take a tea break.
Good morning, ma'am.
Who is this?
Ma'am, I'm Archika from Department of Psychology, RGNIYD.
Okay.
My research work is on working memory, processing speed, and long-term memory. Like, I'm going to find the predictors that predicts the aspects, the factors that predict fluid intelligence. And it is a cross-sectional study, ma'am, where I'm taking children, adolescents, middle adults, and young adults and middle adults. So this is a cross-sectional study, and the test what I'm using is a performance test. I'm using intelligence test, which takes around minimum of 1.5 hours per person. So in my doctoral committee meeting, I was told that I can take 30 people per group. Now, my question is regarding the theoretical background. Now, I have so many theoretical models regarding this, and my work is on, like in India, nobody has done this work so far. And I want to find, because here in India, our native language is not English. That is one thing. And in intelligence, we have two types. One is fluid intelligence, the other one is crystallized. So crystallize is mostly dependent on the language. And the tool what
Mm.
I'm using is an Indian version, but it is completely in English.
Mm.
And the theoretical background, what now I'm just linking these both. Theoretical background, I have so many models. One is developmental cascade model, and so many models are there. Now, should I take one model as my background, or I can, or is it okay if I the results that I get finally, can I relate that whichever model supports my findings? Can I relate that with that theoretical thing? Or should I take the theoretical background before itself?
Yeah. See, definitely you have a hunch of where the children are coming from. Okay. And what actually shapes their intelligence. Okay. Because within the existing, let's say, existing body of knowledge, there is a clear debate between what is called nature and nurture. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Whether our intelligence is natural, or whether our intelligence is something that comes because of nurturing.
Mm.
Okay. So there is a nature and nurture debate with regards to intelligence.
Yes.
Now, therefore, you would have theoretical models that would be in a way falling on this binary on either side. Okay.
Mm.
So the scale that you're trying to measure, I mean, use, and the key research questions that you have in mind and the hypothesis that you have, you need to see which way are you slanting. Okay. Are you slanting towards thinking about intelligence as something that's intrinsic,
Mm.
or intelligence is something that gets nurtured? Okay.
Mm.
Depending on that, then you can try and see what are the critical perspectives of various theoretical models, and which is the one that you think would be more suitable for an Indian context, and then pick that up. But let's say at the end of your analysis, if you have observations that are coming in which in a way tell you that the theoretical model is not really helpful, then you can always say why that's a problem and why some other theory might be a better way of explaining
Mm.
what you're seeing. Okay. But otherwise, what would happen is you are clearly looking at, a test, a measure, what do you call it, a test, a scale, and then you
Mm.
have children, and you have a interest in measuring their intelligence speed or something like that.
Mm.
So it becomes very clearly uh, like a staccato, independent piece of set of observations and interpretations of that stuff,
Mm.
without looking at why. Why do we want to measure this intelligence? In what ways is it important? Yeah. And how does
Mm.
it link to a broader discussion and dialogue and deliberation on issues of intelligence? Because there is a lot of post colonial critique of the idea of IQ.
Mm.
IQ is hugely contested, right?
Mm.
So you need to then look at the broader debates on intelligence and measuring intelligence, and then try and see which one seems to be much more relevant to us, and whether these instrument that you're using
Mm.
is really what that can enable you to have a position on that theory. Because you can always do a research which is saying doing something else, but you have a theory which is something else. You should have what is called a coherence between a theoretical perspective and paradigm and your methodology and what you're trying to do.
Mm.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. So, in case, like, I'm taking developmental cascade model, for example, as my theoretical background, and I get the finding something that is different from that. So, I can also state that it is contrary to the theoretical background. That
Yeah.
cannot happen, right?
No, I don't know. Maybe because I don't know any of these, right? So
Okay.
you should not look at them purely as A is equal to B, B is equal to C. You have to do the depth of reading. Also
Mm.
try and see if what kind of research people have done, having that theoretical background. So when you do, let's say, review of literature on people who use the instrument and what kind of interpretations they have come up with in the area of intelligence, you also do a review to see what kind of theoretical frameworks have they used. Okay, then that will also give you a sense of people who use particular theoretical frameworks are also more likely to do one kind of research and not the other. That clarity you will get. Yeah, so you can't just pick and decide, okay, I want to pick an apple or I want to pick an orange. It's not like that. It's about why do you pick that apple and why do you pick this orange. That clarity you must have.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so if most of you are back, what I'll do is begin with this very short video again. This has to do with what kind of titles do you give for your writing, okay? And what kind of titles are you giving for your dissertations as well? You know, and the need to reflect on what kind of titles you should give and how do you arrive at giving those titles, okay? So is everybody able to hear? So I'll start with this one.
We'll discuss the most important aspect of a research paper, the title. The title is the first thing journal editors and reviewers will see when they receive your paper. It is also the only aspect that will be freely available to readers through search engines or indexing databases. Follow these steps to create the perfect title for your paper. Step 1. Ask yourself these questions. What is my paper about? For example, my paper studies whether drug A improves the motor function of patients suffering from Alzheimer's. What technique/design did I use? I used a randomized trial. Who or what did I study? I studied 400 cases from 6 states in the US. And what were the results? There was an improvement in the motor function of patients. Step 2. List keywords from your answers in step 1. From the previous example, we get some keywords. Drug A, randomized trial, Alzheimer's, 6 states in the US, 400 cases, improvement in the motor function. Step 3, use these keywords to create a sentence. This study is a randomized trial that investigates whether drug A improved the motor function in 400 Alzheimer's patients from 6 states in the US. It reports an improvement in the motor function. Don't worry if this sentence is long. You're about to polish it. Step 4. Create a working title. Delete all repetitive or unnecessary words from this sentence. Here's how. So what you get from this example is randomized trial of drug A for improving motor function in 400 Alzheimer's patients from 6 states in the US reports improved motor function. Note the word count of this working title. Step 5. Create a final title. Start polishing. Delete information that is not essential. Randomized trial of drug A for improving motor function in 400 Alzheimer's patients. There, you have a title for your research paper. You can also add a subtitle to this version. Improves motor function in 400 Alzheimer's patients, a randomized trial. Let's do a quick recap. Remember, always write a title after you've finished writing your research paper. Keep it short and simple. Include all essential information about your paper. Avoid using abbreviations or too many technical terms. Use keywords that highlight what your paper is about. Never insert a period at the end of your title. That brings us to the end of this tutorial. I hope you find these tips helpful. For more resources on writing and publishing a research paper, visit Editage Insights at www.editage.com/insights. Happy writing!
Okay, so we will go over many of these points. So you may actually wonder why I'm talking about titles. Because most of us do spend time actually thinking about what kind of title will be useful for the paper, because the title also represents what you've written in the paper, more or less, okay? And the other important point that comes up, and which also has been covered by the video, is if you were to remember the online search that we have done yesterday, when you give a keyword, the search engine actually searches for that keyword and it will ask you, where do you want me to search? And they actually save search words, they save the keywords that you give for your paper, based on which your paper comes up when somebody is searching for your paper. Okay, therefore, giving the right title, giving the right keywords, all these are very important. And when you're searching also, you need to say where you think you want to search. You have the option of searching for the papers that you're looking for or your keywords through just the title, through just the, or you search only by author's name. When you know the author's name and you say that, I want to look at this particular author's publications, then you search only by author. But you're looking for broad topic, you're not looking for any specific author, then you give specific keyword. And when you're giving the keyword and wanting to search, in the aggregate search engine, you need to decide whether you want to say title, you want to say abstract, or you want to say everywhere in the document. Okay. Now this is an important choice that you have to make, because when you say title, it means that's the most salient aspect of that paper, and that's the reason why the author has put that in the title. But whenever you put your keyword on a title, the system will actually tell you that only 10% of papers actually have the most important keywords sitting in the title, because you can't put everything in the title. You put the most important aspects of the paper in the title, and then you are also given an option to give 5 to 6 keywords. 5 to 6 keywords that necessarily represent your work, which has to do with the broader theme, the broader group that you have been researching. So whether it's women, it's children, it's adolescents, or it's elderly, or people who are thalassemia, or people who have HIV, that particular specific group, then you may want to have a couple of more important aspects of that research, which is what seems to be coming up very evidently. For example, domestic violence, or social inequities, or health inequities, or very specifically things to do with social capital, or aspirations, or motivation. So you have the other key concepts that you're playing around with, which also come in the keywords. And then it's always good to also add one more keyword which says India. Okay, because sometimes when people are searching for, by putting in 3 terms, like they say, women, domestic violence, India, then it's likely your paper will come up because it's a paper that has India. But if the keyword search says and, it means this paper will come up only if the other 2 are there. So though you have India, your paper has other components which have to do with children and education and India, it won't necessarily come up because it's not part of the other string that is there, right? So you need to think about how you look at your keywords, how do you give keywords, etc. So the title therefore becomes very important. So if you give too generic a title, whoever reads the title don't get really excited about going for looking at that paper. You would often find people also, when they do qualitative research, they pick up an interesting expression from the qualitative research and put it up, and put it in quotes, and then give a colon and then write something about it. So that becomes a very important, phrase that somebody is interested in to explore what's really going on. Okay, so titles are a way of telling people, come and read my paper. So that's like the publicity piece. It's like the PR piece. So when you have, films that you want to watch, you're also looking at basically the title of the film. You're looking at who are all the actors, and then you will decide on buying a ticket and going and watching the film, right? So your title is in a way an invitation to readers to read what you have written. So you need to definitely have a title which is not only catchy, but also represents what is there in your paper, and also is quite searchable. You have terms in that are searchable, and it comes up in the search engine. Just to give an interesting, what do you call, humorous example, one of my nephews, uh, when there was this whole thing about, he should be getting married, and we should help him out with looking for a girl, because these days most young people look for their partners, so it's not so much of an issue. But there are many who will say, okay, I can't figure out, please help. What, they say, let's check in the networks, etc. So in the family, distant relative, there was a young woman, and that was a suggestion given that he has to see her profile on bharatmatrimony.com. So he opened up bharatmatrimony.com, and then my children, my son, daughter, and then my sister's children were all sitting around him and having fun. They were younger ones. They were sitting around him. And then when he opened her profile and started seeing, found that in choices of food, what are the things, her hobbies, and then what is it that she likes to listen, what is it that she likes to eat. In choices of music, she's written like Western, classical, Indian classical, Hindustani, Carnatic, everything. Then it came to food. So it's like continental, Mughalai, South Indian, North Indian. Then when it came to something else, it's like that. So it's like every, every parameter, she has every possible keyword. It's there. So my nephew was very young, little, another one. He said, oh my God, this woman is desperate, man. And we just didn't understand, how can somebody have all cuisines that they like all forms of music, they like everything. So uh, obviously this nephew had other reasons why he was not going to proceed on that issue. But that came up for discussion in the family, saying, how come that particular profile has this kind of information in place? And then it turns out that my niece, my brother's daughter, who is an IT professional, has actually done the profile. So the girl didn't do her profile. She only gave her photograph. And my niece, who is an IT professional, she filled up all the details. And when we asked her, how come you didn't fill up everything? She said, when anybody does a keyword search, then no matter what keyword they put, this profile will come up, and that's apparently what they do even when they do their CVs. They will put all the key softwares, they'll put them in the CV. They'll put all the necessary terminologies that have to be there, because typically the first round identification of CVs for jobs is done by the system with some young person who is sitting there and doing it, throwing in keywords. So it means to crack the system, you give every keyword possible. Okay. So however, for a research paper, you can't be doing that. You can't put every possible keyword, but you need to put the right keywords. So going through your, write-ups that you have given me, I was looking at what kind of titles you have. Okay. Of course, many people have not given any title to their write-up. They just said write-up. Okay. They didn't give any title. Many of them also have given like glib titles, like one term or two terms titles, which don't say anything really much. Okay, that's like just one title. There are few very honestly put the titles of their dissertations. So it's like long titles and exactly whatever they probably are going to give their PhD thesis or tentative title, that's what they have shared. So going through those titles, then at least I thought, this is something that's very important to also discuss, because we often see titles which are so prosaic, so boring, that not only they don't convey much, they also somewhere convey that the researcher is not very clear about what he or she is doing. Okay, so I would definitely like each of you to examine the title of your proposal or your writing sample and think about what does it convey. Okay, so it means an effective title should convey the main themes of the study. It should be able to signify the key elements that you're covering in the paper. And it needs to highlight the importance of that research wherever such a possibility is there. And it has to be concise. Like you can't have a 3-line title. Okay, it has to be quite concise. It can't be a very long title. So I would like you to definitely reflect on the titles that you have for your write-ups or for your research proposals or research papers. And definitely, if not now, see how you can rework it. And very often in titles, people also use words like, impact and implications, or, effect, or factors or determinants and all that. So when you have terms that are very technical in nature in the title, definitely your research paper has to actually justify such a title. Okay. For example, if you have something like the impact of COVID on women's employment, okay, you can say a word like that because you have prior data to say what are the employment figures. So post COVID, if you're looking at employment figures and there is a decline, you are able to say that there is an impact and there is a decline, and you're attributing it to COVID-19. Okay. But if you're saying that the impact of COVID-19 on consumption pattern among middle class households, okay, it's interesting subject and you can definitely do something like that. But the point is, can you use a word impact? Because when you use a term like impact, it basically presupposes that you have a baseline data, which is prior to the COVID-19, which gives you very clearly the households, the sample households that you're interested in terms of what are their consumption patterns. So post-COVID, when you do a study, you're able to say that there is an impact. Is there either a decline or there is an increase? So any kind of impact which is referring to increase, decrease, decline, etc., is very numeric in nature. And unless you have baseline data, you won't be able to talk about impact. So in everyday parlance, people use the word impact. But in academic field, it has a very clear significance that you can talk about impact only if you have baseline data. You can talk about implications. Okay. Similarly, if you were to make huge claims saying that this particular TV program has made a huge difference, like for example, a particular advertisement, TV advertisement on sanitation has actually improved hand washing among people. If somebody wants to do research and ask people and then say that there is an increase in hand washing, yeah, that the problem with that kind of research is at this point of time and generally in society, you don't have one input that people are getting. People are getting multiple inputs from multiple sources. So to be able to then say that this is the only source which has given rise to this change, one unidirectional kind of relationship, is again extremely flawed. Okay, it's not at all right to do something like that. You may make an attribution. You may actually ask people, has this advertisement, is this the advertisement that has made this difference? If you say that, then maybe you can at least say that 80% of the people whom we asked said that it's because of this advertisement. Yeah. Sometimes you might see an advertisement and be very impressed by it. But let's say if you don't have water in your house and you don't have soap in your house, your behavior practice will not change. So when you ask me questions on, do you recall this advertisement? What is the message in this advertisement? Maybe on 100% count, I can tell you everything. But when it comes to what is it that you actually do, then maybe my practices are not in line with my knowledge. Okay. So a lot of research that happens under the broad rubric of what is known as KAP, knowledge, awareness, and practice. This was the kind of critique that was there on these kind of research, methodology. That assumption was people who have knowledge and have the awareness are more likely to also have behavioral practices which are in line with that knowledge. And this comes really quite in a way, very startling in a way, is majority of the people who smoke know that smoking is injurious to health. Okay, so it's not that they don't know. They know that smoking is injurious to health despite knowing that they smoke. Okay, so knowledge and awareness does not automatically lead to practices which are in line with what the knowledge and awareness is all about. Right? So human behavior is very complex, and research that we try to do, we need to have a lot of clarity about what is it that we are attempting to do, how are we actually attributing all that we are capturing as truth, etc. Okay, so I would like to, as I said, reflect on your titles, and I would like to discuss the titles that I have on for my papers. But before I do that, I can pause a bit, and we can have a bunch of question answers, and then we'll carry on from there before we break for lunch. Okay, so I just will stop here, and I'll look at if there are questions that are here which we can take up. Somebody has written, ma'am, can words in the title be an inclusion and exclusion criteria? Okay. What I'm saying is what you include is what you definitely need to have. Obviously, what you exclude, you won't have in your title. Okay, so you won't have a title saying HIV among middle class women and not sex workers. You can't have a title like that, right? So you will have a title of what you have included, not of what you have excluded. If we have 3 phases of research, like exploring prevalence, construction of tool, and developing of model, how can we include all the 3, or what can be excluded from the title? Depends on, number one, don't write one paper that's capturing everything. Okay, because number one, you can't do justice, because most research papers accept only about 6,000 words, sometimes even lesser than that. So you should not try to capture everything of all that you have done in one paper. Supposing tool preparation itself has been a huge exercise, and that itself is an important learning through that research, then make that a paper, right? Using the tool, you have actually captured the prevalence rate, then that has to be a paper. Then using all this, if you have done a new way of modeling, health seeking behavior, or modeling healthcare service delivery, or modeling access to healthcare, etc., then that has to be another paper. So if you can actually come up with 3 publications, then why have 1 publication and 1 Jamboree title? Okay, so consider having more papers rather than 1 paper. Then
For thesis title.
Thesis title should be very clear and crisp. You can't have everything. Okay, so you need to look at what is the major objective of the research, because you have a major objective and then you have sub objectives, right? So what is the major objective? So if the objective of the research is towards model building, then you need to have model building as the title, right? Work on giving a title which is highlighting model building. If your study is about capturing the prevalence rate of some particular illness, of which there is not much work being done, then let it be very clearly of prevalence. Because typically in a thesis, we do many things and then arrive at something, but we can't have everything in the title. Okay, so you need to be more, you need to have better justification, also focus in the title that you give for your thesis. Nowadays, articles come with catchy titles like those we generally see in newspapers and magazines. this is helpful in attracting readers, but it's not helping for article search. Is it better to stick on the conventional method of assigning title with keywords? You can give a catchy title and then you have a colon and then you write something. Okay. For example, we have a book manuscript that we are working on, where one of the authors has written a paper on smartphone use among Muslim girls, okay, and the kind of restrictions that they go through. So the paper title begins with, I'm not allowed to upload pictures. Okay, so it says something like, I cannot upload pictures, colon, and then it says Muslim girls access to smartphones and social media use. Okay, so it's like you do have an interesting early part of the title, which is catchy, and then after the colon, you spell out a little bit more about the key touchstones of that particular research. Yeah, so so definitely after the colon, you bring in all the key terms. So there is Muslim girls and there is smartphone or social media. So in terms of keyword search in the title, those definitely will get picked up. And in the keywords, you can give many other things to do with, seclusion practices. Then you can say India. You can also say Facebook. You can give about another six other keywords. So there is a possibility of, and your abstract is also going to be captured. So your abstract also has to be quite well written, getting all the right keywords into it, and also conveying what you've written in the paper. Okay, right. Any more questions? I think I've answered.
Ma'am, I have a question.
Yeah.
Can I ask? Yeah.
Yes, please.
Ma'am, actually, the research should start with the research question. But recently I attended a program wherein the professor said even the research title also should be a question. Like, does group therapy help in abstinence of substance? So can we have this kind of title, ma'am, for our research? Or does psychotherapy help in anxiety? So this kind of title will help us, ma'am.
Yeah, see, whenever you have a question like that in the title, it means you are actually questioning it, right? So if you have an entire paper with evidences to show that it doesn't work, then actually bringing in that title is a way of attracting people who are wedded to thinking about it. Okay,
Yes,
people are completely wedded to thinking that psychotherapy is the answer. Then the moment you put a question mark, then that attracts attention to saying, oh, is it even, I mean, are you saying that it doesn't work? What is your evidence? How did you arrive at that? So that's the point. You will put a question mark when you're confident that you're questioning it because you're going to argue and show that actually it doesn't work. Okay, level,
okay.
Lot depends. Your title and the confidence with which you can put a title like that is linked to how strong are you with your argument in your paper using evidences. Okay, I had a very senior researcher, demographer, who is no more, right? At the height of family planning program, where everybody was only talking about, sterilizations and, contraception, this and that. She actually wrote a very small monograph analyzing data that's available, census data and registrar general data, where she actually had a question saying, does the family planning program contribute to population reduction, okay, or reduction in population growth? She had a question like that, and she argued how the family planning program is not contributing towards reduction of population growth, right? So it means you should have that level of strength to be able to counter the existing ways of thinking. Then you put a question mark. But yeah, as a young researcher where you have data and you're just making your mark, and your data is also something that has to be validated, etc., through publications, then sometimes those kind of things might put you in a wrong foot. It goes to a reviewer who believes that whatever you said, counseling is something or therapy is what, then they will completely demolish your paper. Okay. So senior people are more likely to have papers with question marks. Okay. So I have some examples which I'll show you a little later. Tips for framing a title of articles and research. I think I've shown the film. I don't know if you were there or you logged in late. When you get this PPT, you will get to see that. It does say clearly, you indicate, for example, the group that you're focusing on, the key themes that you are working with, and the broad conclusion that seemed to be coming up, or the method that you used. So try and have all these keywords, write what your research is all about on all the parameters, pick all the keywords and see how you would want to frame a sentence, a title, which represents what you've written. So you don't start with the title. Once you have clarity about what you want to write, you do your draft papers, almost by the time you're finalizing, then you come up with your title. Yeah, you might actually play around with 3 titles or 4 titles and then decide on one title. Yeah, any more questions?
Yes, ma'am. One question, ma'am,
Yeah.
from Anita.
Who is
Tips
this?
for framing, yeah. Is there any tips for framing a title of articles or?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You know, the tips can't be purely what I can tell you. It's about, I have shown that in the film. It was there in the film. And I also just talked to you about it. Like, it's linked to what you're actually covering in your paper and what's the argument that you're making. Okay. And what, for example, if it's to do with particular groups that you're working with, you're using particular method, and you also have particular outcome. So try and have a title that captures all that. Therefore, titles like a socio-economic survey of sex workers, or something like a socio-economic survey of school dropouts, then something like situational analysis of private hospitals. These kind of things, don't really catch any attention. So if you're something about school dropouts when you have studied and you see that there's some huge factor that is contributing towards school dropout, try and see if you can bring that onto your title. Okay. And then your discussion on school dropouts is with reference to that aspect which you are developing. Otherwise, let's say much of the school dropout related issues are linked to, performance in exams, or being able to, being able to reach school, etc. But you have actually come up with a finding where through a qualitative research, you've spoken to lots of adolescent girls and all that. And they simply say that, we don't have enough clothes. In schools, they don't have uniforms. Every other day, you have to wear another dress and go. And if there's a lot of pressure that you need to wear nice clothes, neat clothes, then a lot of children have difficulty, keep wearing nice clothes every day to school because they can't manage it, right? So maybe a lot of dropping out happens because of that. So maybe you have a title that says, I can't manage new clothes, school dropout among girls, something like that. So you're like throwing in a new observation that's coming from your research, and you're trying to get people to pay attention to that, and that becomes part of your title. So as I said, the richness of your data and the depth of your findings is what gives you the confidence not only to write your paper but do all these things, like have a fantastic title and be able to have conversations on many aspects to do with it, etc. In titling the thesis, is it required to have words like a study on, impact of, effectiveness of? No, usually you should not. That's what I'm saying. Most studies, most PhD theses have these kind of titles, and they actually don't qualify by definition to have such a title. As I said, you're saying impact of, and you don't have a baseline study, and that therefore is a flawed title. You are saying effectiveness, but you probably have not used any measure to study effectiveness. But you have, so if you have a measure of effectiveness and you use that measure, and then your entire thesis is to show the effectiveness of a particular program, then yes, have that as your title. But if you have a title and you barely have done much on effectiveness, then that doesn't become a title that you can go with. Okay, so it means your title should not only represent what you have done in your thesis, but it should also be robustly standing the test of the examiner's questioning. Okay, so that clarity you must have. Yeah, every research that you do is a study, so why call it a study again, right? So stop doing that. Have more clear kind of titles which are based on what you've studied and what you've been able to capture. But very often, any case, dissertation titles tend to be more prosaic, but research article titles need not be very prosaic. Yeah. If we are trying to see the effect of training on coping strategies of police recruits, what can be the other form? Means what? What can be another title? Training on coping strategies of police recruits. Again, what I'm saying is, if you want to have a title which actually makes a lot of attribution, means you're attributing that all coping strategies of police recruits is because of training, you should be confident about that. And does your data tell you that? If it does, then maybe you can give that kind of credit to the training and credit to the fact that police are able to cope better when they're getting training. Okay, so definitely place value on the weightage that you want to give when you put something in the title. The moment you put something in the title, it means you're giving huge weightage to that. If there is very weak connection to that, then don't put it in the title, right? So that's the clarity you must have. What is the level of, if it's a quantitative research, what is the statistical significance of that which is showing up? Then if that is statistically significant and comes up with very high levels of confidence interval, yeah, then it's part of your title, it makes sense. But that's only one variable among many. Then you can't put that upfront on the title. Okay. You can always say coping strategies among police, contributing factors can have, within which training is one of the factor probably that you've looked at. So that way you keep it open. So you're discussing many factors and not just training alone. Or you can always say, does training help? Or question mark, which then will say that it's helping or not helping in the paper. Okay, so raising a question, posing things in a little contradicting way sometimes gives you the possibility to argue it out. So it depends on what is the line of paper. The line of a paper is argumentative in nature. Then having a title which is like a question is important. That's what was my answer earlier. Does therapy actually lead to something? And you say, does therapy lead to this and question mark? Then you're actually ready to argue that it does not. Okay, or it does. So when you have an argumentative line, then you have questions in your title. When you have something else which is more observational and understanding oriented, then you have a different title. So you can, from all your research survey that you have done, just do a study of all the titles. I would suggest that. Just study the titles and see how people have given titles and what's the relationship between the title and the paper. Okay, that itself will be an interesting exercise because it gives you lots of interesting insights into how titles get organized. If the research is about case study of something, is there anything to look out for? What study is there in the title? Yeah, you can have a title like case study, but it's more useful if it's a like single case study based paper. It has to be really a solid case study. You should have done a detailed case study, because case studies also have lots of parameters, and when you've covered all those parameters become very important. If you've covered all that parameters, and it's like, for example, a single institutional study, okay, you studied one institution and that's your case study, then definitely you should say case study of an educational institution, colon, and put the name of that institution. Or you put the name of the institution and put colon and say a case study of post-colonial institutional building, something like that. So definitely the focus becomes the institute that you're studying, or the individual that you're studying, or the what do you call it? Case studies are basically about individuals, institutions. I don't think processes can be given a title like case study. Okay, yeah. Or you can have case studies of different forms of mobilization that have been attempted by different kinds of social movements. So you study each social movement and then create case studies of the social movements. So yes, but it should again justify that you have actually done a solid case study of the phenomena. I'll go to the next question now. Role of impact investing organizations to create and develop social enterprises in India. Role of impact investigating. Yeah, I have also seen, I think you have a write-up also with the same title. The way that title stands, honestly, it's not very exciting, okay? Because impact investing is happening for a long time, and impact investing is seen as definitely as something that is beneficial, because social enterprises also need funding, and not all banks, etc., are ready to fund them, right? So impact investing is clearly something that is important. So to then have a title like this, what I would say is these kind of titles are useful when you're writing an essay. Okay, an essay is one which is like information oriented, just are stating all understanding and facts, which is like a simple, straightforward note. Now, essays. So you make a distinction between an essay and a research paper. Okay, when you write an essay, it basically is compiling what is known already, right? So there is nothing new that you're adding as a researcher. So that is what often students do in the name of assignment. They'll say assignment, and they basically in their assignment they'll write an essay. So as a teacher, I remember when I used to give topics to students for doing assignment, initially what I have done was I had a long list of different kinds of topics. So it would have something like women-headed households, domestic violence, women and disasters, so on and so forth. Then students used to pick up the topic. And then it's like, if it says women-headed households, then you'll go and quickly search for papers on women-headed households, and you start with an essay saying, okay, among households, there are also households that are headed by women. This much percentage of households in our country are headed by women. The reasons why households get headed by women as opposed to men is this, and this. So it's like they're compiling what is known, and that's like what you call as an essay. There's no criticality to it at all. Right? Then I felt I'm basically giving assignments that are generating no special skill in these students. They are basically reproducing what they read, and there is nothing. So what I'm doing in the Bloom's taxonomy is just looking at whether they've understood or not, but nothing in terms of or synthesis. They're able to synthesize, read stuff and synthesize, but I'm not analyzing anything about are they able to evaluate all that they read, are they able to write a critical note based on that. So I then moved away from giving these single glib titles to saying things like, or asking students to look at let's say children's survival in women-headed households. Or you don't just give a title like domestic violence. You say domestic violence, and as I had one of the bullets, domestic violence and pregnancy outcomes, or domestic violence and girl child education, or domestic violence and child labor. So you are looking at two clear factors and their relationship. So you go beyond the descriptive what wala question to why questions. So the title like role of impact investing organizations to create and develop social influence is an essay title. Okay. So at a level where you're a faculty or a PhD student, don't give titles which look like titles of essays. Give titles which look like they are titles for a research paper, which are bringing in a critical edge to what you are bringing onto the table. That will what work when you send a paper for publication, not these kind of titles. These are good for typical journals like Yojana, some newsletters, some bulletins that are brought out, or All India Universities Associations bulletins. These don't aim for this because they don't count. You have what is called impact factor. You also have high levels of citation, and all institutions are getting into the NIRF ranking. These kind of things won't count because you won't get these kind of writings published in any journals of repute. So come up with more critical ways of looking at impact investing and whether they have actually made a difference to social enterprises. Look at that and write a paper that will work. Okay. Avash Thakurji. Okay. Ma'am, my question is, if in this researcher want to conduct research in southern part, whether it's ethical to use India. Oh yes, lots of people do that. There are many books that have that. In fact, very often authors write very specifically the zone, region, etc. It's in fact publishers, because of the market requirements that they have, they put out these bombastic things like, India. While it probably is a study done in one village or two villages, it will have a book title as India. This is problematic, but very often, especially if somebody is trying to publish a book, they have a lot of considerations that go by market, what works in the market, book market, But for research paper, you don't have to do. But, if you're doing international paper, you can always say Southern India. You can do that. They would know that, right? Or let's say if I'm doing a study in Mumbai and I give a title Mumbai, or let's say Hyderabad. I do a study in Hyderabad and I put the title Hyderabad also. There is no geographical specificity because Hyderabad also exists in Pakistan. So then say Hyderabad, India, right? That kind of coordinates become important. Okay, Dr. Lalita, youth civic engagement, water management, Kachipattu village, Sriperumbudur. Okay, this is the title that you had. These kind of titles, what happens is they're okay for a report. If you're writing a report based on youth civic engagement, you can have this kind of report. But let's say youth civic engagement in water management is a very important aspect that you worked on, but you also have a methodology for how you've done it. Put that. Don't worry about rest of the points like Kanchipuram, all that is of no required, but you can say youth civic engagement in water management, an action research in India or in South India, something like that. So you are bringing in a new methodology which you think is important for bringing in youth civic engagement, in water management. So think of what else you would like, intervention research, right? Okay. Practically all are, let's say, the social intervention research. Yeah, you can say social intervention research, youth civic engagement in water management, experience of a social or experience of an intervention research would be useful. So definitely you should be capturing not only the youth civic engagement, how was it done, but also the entire experience of being able to bring in that youth civic engagement in water